It's the Undressed Show. Yes, it's Wednesday night Undressed. Here we are again, sat in front of an audience filled with the amazement of the expensive decor that is Conroy's Bar here in Uptown Lawrence. Yes, that special and welcoming smell that greets one on entry. We know we're back at home at Conroy's Emporium, where you can catch anything your heart desires. So, my fellow Undressed, yes, it's me, your Brexited host, Jeremy Taylor, and I try and bring some semblance of credibility, perhaps a soupçon of amusement and light to the shadows of this Undressed podcast, recorded live here in the back of Conroy's. I look around me and what do I see? It's the rotting floorboards, the chairs with nails sticking through the seats, the old steak fries, creaking fans and failing air conditioning. True, that's all part of the rich ambience of Conroy's, the bar students and tourists come to see where their forefathers met and shared some little hilarity. But I digress. On our naked but not undressed panel today, the very wise Dr. Orlando, the indefatigable Kathleen Taylor, and after a quick escape from a stage not far from Broadway, Donna Kane-Swan. I know you all want to know what's been going on at Conroy's Bar during the week. The funny thing is, a man, a cat and an ostrich walked into the bar. They sat down and the man offered to buy a round of beer. Sure, says the cat, that'd be nice, but you know I'm not buying you one in return. Fine, said the man. Then he went and bought 3 beers. They drank and talked for a little while until they finished their beer, and then the ostrich asks if they'd like another. Please, says the cat, but there's no way I'm going to buy any more beer. The ostrich orders 3 beers and they sit and drink and talk for a little bit longer. But when the time for the next time comes around, the man and the ostrich both look at the cat expectantly. No way, says the cat. I made it damn clear that I'm not paying for any beer. You want more, you'll have to pay. Sighing, the man got up and asked the 3 more beers. Conroy, who is obviously confused, asked the man what's going on. Well, says the man, I found an old lamp a few years ago and I gave it a rub and this genie comes out. Says he'll give me anything I wish for. But I'm not sure he really understood. I asked for a tall bird with a tight pussy. But I can't sit here chatting. Let's get on with the show. Yes.
Okay, while you're busy moaning, which indeed that was groan-worthy.
Yeah.
I really must comment, Jeremy, how proud I am that you use on such a regular basis soupçon as a word. Not many people would use that one on a regular
Soupçon. A little soupçon. Here, my friends, there's one thing you should know. It's thought from surveys that under 30% of the population are actually concerned about the conventions and elections until around October. And if asked before, respond with an unconsidered knee-jerk reaction to what they consider unimportant. He said, she said event. However, if true, how might this affect our lives?
You think it's going to affect our lives?
Well, it's about 27%, in fact, is the actual figure.
Well, yeah. So even if only 27% of the country pays attention to what's going on in the conventions, that's not the real benefit of them. Yes, you get a bump. What you get is a bunch of people on camera, on tape, that gets played in bits throughout the rest of the campaigns. They are on record as to what they've got for you. And you can go back to that and tie them back to it.
Yeah, but we're not really a society that's known for having a long attention span. Anything that's said yesterday in the campaign and the convention in the news is forgotten the next day. So although that may have been advantageous for us, I don't know, before I was born, right now it's just it's like the NPR drive they do for funds for donations. It's just like an annoyance while I'm trying to watch my normal TV. Yeah, sure, whatever you want to call that thing.
Well, I'm not so sure I agree. As the anti-Trump ads continue to pile...
He has an auntie?
Yeah. Pile on moment after moment of his most embarrassingly horrible things he's said, and they just keep playing them and playing them and playing them. People are possibly going to pay attention. And they're just going to keep getting reminded that the guy makes fun of people with disabilities.
Donna.
I so want you to be right on that, because I'm kind of more in Lewis's camp. But I do think that, and this is going to sound mean, but the more intelligent viewer is going to pick up on some things. I think today, when he openly invited Russia to spy on the United States, and Paul Ryan had to scramble to a microphone to inform the United States public that the Republican Party nor the United States will ever sanction such a thing. I think things like that might eventually sink in and stay with
But do you
people.
not think that
I don't.
in real life, people who are not terribly interested, people out the front of the bar right now who just don't care at the moment about the election, they think we'll care about it in October. Just think the idea of Trump saying to the Russians, hey, if you happen to come across 300, 3,000 or 30,000 emails from Hillary's thing, could you let us know what it says?
Yeah, well,
And they just,
maybe
they just think it's funny.
maybe this goes back to what Lewis said earlier, in that if it ever happened, it happened before he was born, although I think you were born at this time. We never have forgotten the Willie Horton ads. We've never forgotten Michael Dukakis ruining his campaign by, sitting in a tank with a helmet on. Some things, and oftentimes their images, I never, even today, 50 some odd years later, have never forgotten LBJ's ad with the child and the nuclear bomb going off in the background. And perhaps that's what it takes, a visual rather than a discussion or a clip on a radio. Maybe that's what it's going to
take. It's said that Winston
take.
Churchill lost the election after the Second World War in England. Having won the war, he lost the election. This is before the end of the Japanese War sort of thing. He lost the war because he couldn't understand why no one was paying attention to what he was saying when he was out on the hustings. And he actually told people to pay attention. And then it got into, nuclear war and all this sort
On
of thing.
hustings means campaigning.
And they were saying, do you want this old fart, basically, Labour was saying, do you want this old fart with a nuclear weapon? Who knows what he'll do? Now, Churchill, being Churchill, turned it around on them and said, do you want an inexperienced finger on the trigger, or do you want an experienced finger on the trigger? Sure, but I think he lost it then when he said to people, if you be quiet, you might learn something from me. And everybody goes, well, you want to talk to us like that, stuff you, and voted elsewhere. And I just wondered whether or not there are, by virtue of the fact we do this podcast every week, that we're actually interested, in politics. Mm-hmm. Are there not millions and millions of people out there who really just don't give a toss until it's time for them to think about it? We'll think about it when we have to.
I think you're right. The last week or two of the campaign is when things are going to have the biggest impact.
Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that the stuff that's going on right now doesn't have some impact. The simple fact that Trump gets his name out there in every single news cycle, for good or bad, I think is part of a grand scheme. I think he is building on his own name recognition. And I hate to say it, he's doing a damn good job of it.
I think the funny thing is that, if the Republicans were, or someone had been quick enough to actually throw it back at him and say, well, if you do find something from Hillary's emails, that would be cool because our Secret Service haven't. And also, by the way, if you do find out what Trump's accounts say, perhaps you could release that as well. We'd be interested to find out.
His tax returns.
His tax
That'd be
returns,
fun.
yeah. Let's have a look at his tax returns. The bottom line is that if it is the Russians, and they have actually done it, it's incredibly embarrassing for America, the whole of America, not just Democrats or Republican America. It's embarrassing that Russian hackers can break into what we're up to.
I'm kind of thinking that ship has sailed, Jeremy. We've known for a long time that Russia can hack us. The Chinese have been routinely hacking us,
Oh,
and
don't
we
be
in
silly.
turn,
And I
think-
Don't-
we
no,
in
no,
turn
that's
are
a-
routinely hacking others.
Are you
It's one
su-
of the reasons why we kind of tread lightly on this subject, because we are busy doing the same thing.
I agree with you up to the point where you say that's why we tread lightly. I think we tread lightly because nobody cares. I think the fact that some rich white woman's email got hacked by some foreign country has absolutely nothing to do with, as Jeremy said, the people out in front of the bar.
I would agree. When we're talking politics, nobody cares. When it comes down to business, everybody cares. When they steal all the credit cards from Target and various other stores, then everybody cares.
No, I agree. I agree 100%.
So people are aware that everybody's out there hacking everybody else.
Yeah. So I from a somewhat enlightened technological perspective, I wouldn't be shocked to find out that we're being hacked by the Chinese or the Russians or my next door neighbor. It's just kind of the nature of the
kid
beast.
sitting in the basement in his pajamas. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's just
You
kind of the
just
nature
watch
of
out
the
to
beast.
see what your next door neighbor leaves on your front porch tonight.
Well, maybe the bigger effect is going to be on the people around the other politicians. Ryan had to step in, and
I don't think he
say
did.
something about Trump.
I think Ryan is still playing with the old, the pre-Trump rules, and I think it is entirely possible that 10 years from now we're going to be talking about American politics pre-Trump and post-Trump. And I think that everything that Trump has done is completely foreign to politicians in general, and they are scrambling to try to figure it out.
And you don't think it's ever going to go back to normal?
I don't know.
I would agree with you if he wins. If he doesn't, I think we will close our eyes and hang our heads and forget this shameful episode.
Well, the same thing happened back in the 60s when the Republicans put up a far-right racist candidate then, and they lost badly, and it went back to politics as normal.
Okay, let's move on. I do not do this, and so I don't have experience of it. I'm talking about, of course, tweets.
I was just going to apologize to
As
Kath.
Donald Trump tweety squawks about those nasty Democrats and threatens lawsuits against anyone else who bullies him, actress and comedian Leslie Jones quit Twitter after receiving a barrage of targeted racist, sexist, and otherwise abusive messages following the release of the all-female remake of Ghostbusters. Does there come a point where free speech is being abused, Lewis? And that was
No.
a big fry, wasn't it?
That
It
was a
an
huge,
extra big
huge
one
steak fry.
for you to get your tongue around.
Exactly. Tickled my
But
uvula.
you've done it
yeah.
now.
Disgusting.
Yes.
Disgusting.
Yes.
That's a hard question to answer. I don't think that what caused Leslie to get off Twitter was an abuse of free speech, if that makes any sense. I think it was in incredibly poor taste and rude and mean-spirited, but I think that that's part of the package for free speech, right up until the point where they start inciting violent acts or threatening violent acts against her. I see Donna
sure there
disagrees.
is a set
Shaking,
point.
Yeah,
Donna is shaking her
I
head.
went back today and looked up, we all wrap ourselves in the blanket of free speech on a regular basis. Everybody hides behind that. So I went back today and looked up everything to do with free speech, and there are so many exceptions to free speech. It is not funny. And one of them is this example right here, and I do not understand why lawyers have not been called in, because you cannot do anything that would obviously libel or slander someone. That is not protected by free speech. And obscene speech, which we have now come to call hate speech, is not protected. And if this man has been clearly identified, he's acknowledged it, he's admitted it was him, what he has done, and you said it rather than with the exception of putting in the word hate. He targeted her with hate speech, and that is not protected by the First Amendment.
You know something, it's not just this country and amendments and so on. This is happening all over the world. In England, they just jailed a man for 3 years who was trolling the mother of a toddler who had been horrifically murdered. And this person had decided to start targeting her, pretending she was the child grown up. And it was just horrific. It was horrible stuff. And they've jailed her partly with a stalking order.
They jailed him?
Her.
They jailed the mom.
No. The troller, the troll was a woman.
Gotcha.
A sadistic, sick woman. And they if you consider that targeting somebody with abuse on Twitter as related to stalking, there is a parallel there. You can perhaps get at it that way. In India, there women are facing online abuse in record numbers. And Maneka Gandhi is their Minister of Women and Child Protection, and is trying to get women to report this so that they can stop it and go after the people who are doing it legally. This isn't just a problem in the U.S., and so the rights of free speech and so on, as we have laws, is just one small part of it.
There are other rules
Certainly.
as well that, you are allowed supposedly to say whatever you like, but you cannot. And the example that people give, the legal example, is it is not legal, but you are allowed to, or it is legal, but you are not allowed to, depending on how you want to put it, to run into a cinema and shout fire.
That under the Supreme Court, that is called a false statement of fact. As we said earlier, libel or slander, and then negligently false statement, which would be
So
fire.
does there come a point then that Trump says crooked Hillary, for example, and he says the same thing about Tim Kaine? Now, I don't know about Hillary, but I've got this sneaky feeling that Tim Kaine is not someone who has been caught out at doing anything. They've tried to show that he took money when he was governor. The only problem with that is that he was legally entitled to the money. Morally, it could be argued that maybe he shouldn't have done it, but the fact is that he was legally allowed to it. So if, for example, Tim Kaine hasn't done anything that he shouldn't have done, and he's being called Crooked Tim Kaine, could he take on Trump and say, look, this guy is saying these things about me, it's not true, I'm not crooked. You may not like my politics, but I'm not a crook.
When you say take on Trump, what exactly do you mean? Bringing up a civil lawsuit against this
for
guy?
slander.
For slander, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
he's constantly threatening to bring up lawsuits
Yeah.
against anybody who
but-
says anything nasty about him.
What good does that do, especially in the middle of a campaign? When Trump is running on a campaign of, I'm the biggest, toughest, baddest guy in the room, and I can say and do what I want, how would a civil lawsuit that is going to take longer than the election cycle...
Probably no good.
Yeah, help.
Well, you're bringing up a conundrum because it's a tactic that Trump uses against his enemies and has from the moment that there was such a thing as the businessman Donald Trump. I will sue you. You won't want to wait it out in court. You won't want to pay this. Now we're in an election cycle. How will this look? This will drag out. Just gives Trump more publicity. And so you end up, Jeremy's right, the man would have a perfect case for slander. But do you do that in the middle of an election cycle?
No, that's ultimately my question. I don't think anybody here disagrees that
Well,
you
the
could
thing
sue
is
him.
the thing is, you see, that I'm wondering whether there's going to come a point when Trump has difficulties transferring from businessman with the backing of his business and the funding that the business gives to him and his lawyers to political operative.
You mean being the most powerful man on the planet?
Well, I think there may come a point when he personally cannot afford to take on someone who has effectively unlimited resources. Because I am sure that Trump does not personally have unlimited resources. Trump Co. probably does. But there is a law, I thought, that you are not allowed to commingle private finances, election finances, and business finances.
A law that he's clearly
This is
blatantly
why
breaking.
the woman who...
not sure that he is.
No,
the
no,
woman
Who wrote Melania Trump's speech? His corporate staffer, who was not being paid as a
she's gonna
campaign
tell that story.
person.
Or so we don't have any documentation to state.
She offered
currently.
to resign from his company. He refused. She is not. No, they've already looked into it. She's not a campaign staffer. She's not being paid by the campaign, yet she was contributing to the campaign while being paid in his
Through
corporate world.
Trump, yeah.
It's being looked into as illegal campaign contribution.
Well, Jeremy, I really don't think there is a waiver, I guess, about that. I think everyone, including the Republican Party, thinks he will not be able to make the transition, financial or politically.
That's right, but if you started wandering around and said, oh, crooked Jeremy Taylor, I would have to stop you, because that's going to cause my business problems, it's going to cause my personal life problems, etc. And if you've got crazy people doing that, the people who think that's the right thing to do, and as a public figure, my producer and the engineer here know, I do have to be a little careful, because there are crazy people out there. Eric, the producer, has this a lot, with women chasing him and stalking him and all that sort of thing. There's often women outside the studio knocking on the window and things like that when we're trying to record stuff. And it is a bit sad, it's true, but I mean, what can he do?
There's one in that bench seat over there
there's
now,
one
just
not
waiting
far from us
to
now.
jump
It's
up.
just ready to pounce.
Yeah.
No, Jeremy, okay. You're making the case that Trump will somehow have to change his personality if he wins and becomes even more powerful than he is right now.
But the U.S. government has restrictions on its free speech, and it cannot go around suing people, putting people in jail, and,
The U.S. government can't put people in jail?
They have a number of restrictions on free speech, a number of them.
Yes,
that you know about.
But if he flouts them, so what?
Hey, just change it a little bit. Has anybody ever asked Donald Trump whether he actually intends to give up running his company if he were to happen to win the presidency? He's already made it clear that his vice president is going to be the one who's in charge of both domestic and national policy, which means there's nothing left for him to do.
Right.
So
Except
would
run
he give
around
up?
in that, or fly around in that plane and look
Yes,
good.
but would he try to continue to run his company and use the U.S. to make himself richer?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say
silence.
that's going to be against U.S. law, and that he could try, but he won't
I'm going to
succeed.
say it doesn't matter. Are we meaning that just because Dick Cheney wasn't running Halliburton, that he didn't make himself richer while he was vice president?
Yeah,
The bottom
but
line is,
would
as
it
we
be
said earlier, does anybody,
impeachable?
other than the sort of people around this table, which is a very small
point. Bring
percentage
it
of the
back.
country, 25% of the country, do they actually care? What they care about is that they haven't got potholes in the road, the Russians aren't attacking us, and that their taxes are going down.
Oh, don't
That's
forget
what
the
they
very
care.
important part about not allowing your neighbor's dog to poop on your lawn. That's hugely
Well, we
important.
don't like poupon. That's true.
Oh, God.
No, that is true. Have you poupon?
I have no poop.
No poupon. I just wondered, really whether or not people can just say what the heck they like on Facebook and tweets, and really and truly no one's going to do anything about it.
I think that I'm sorry, Donna, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think that in the case of Trump right now in the election cycle, he understands this. He is operating in a unique circumstance. He can pretty much say and do what he wants as long as he doesn't literally break any criminal laws. He can say and do what he wants because the civil stuff doesn't matter until after the election is over. So he can make slanderous statements against Hillary. He can make slanderous statements against his other Republican contenders before they got there. Because it can either go one of two ways. They're either going to win their slander case, but then he gets to call them a sissy, or they're not going to win his slander case.
But are there any other... I'm going to look at our producer, Eric, right now. I'm just wondering whether Eric may or may choose not to comment on this, but you can nod. FCC rules on what you can or can't say on a broadcast, whether it's on TV or on radio. I mean, it could, some of the things that Trump says, particularly the one about the advert. There's the advert that Clinton is running at the moment of the reporter who's I forget what disease he's got, but his arms could flail around all over the place. Or he was talking about blood coming out of her, whatever it is, and things like that. He's only, it seems to me, when we're broadcasting, he's 9/10 off what the FCC would not like. Is he not? What do you think? When he goes and says something, when he really goes rogue, He's getting.
There you go. You got a whole speech, and the FCC steps in and bleeps out whole paragraphs. Wouldn't that be great?
It'd be great for Trump. It would be the absolute best thing for him. It makes it look like he's rogue, renegade, not one of these normal, regular politicians. He can say and do whatever he wants, and it doesn't matter if he's got a
He bleeped out everything he said. Then he just looked like a complete puppet, an orange puppet sitting there, gesticulating and jerking and twitching.
Let's just see what Eric has to say. Because the fines are huge, aren't they? I mean, the fines are designed to be so huge it takes down a radio station.
And this is, the argument has to be made, though, especially with celebrity status, and both of these politicians have achieved that. So it opens it up a little bit more that you can say ridiculous things in a political context. Some of the things he says on Twitter, he probably could not get away with on broadcast television or broadcast radio. But, I mean, nothing has come. I mean, he's not been censored yet. He's not cursing.
That's exactly the point.
Well, it's possibly that it hasn't occurred to anybody. I mean, there are things that happen that people just don't. They don't put it all together and say, hang on, we could stop Trump by this.
Well, hang on. The FCC doesn't fine a guest on the radio show for using a bad word. They fine the radio. So he's not the person who's broadcasting it.
Yeah, it would be NBC or CBS, whoever.
Yeah, but they're all covering the same exact press conference. If he's going to let loose, it's going to go out on all the networks.
And when shows expect that someone will do that, they go on a 30-second delay.
It's called a dump button.
So they
don't
have just
to
that
actually go to
opportunity
the restroom to
bleep it
use
out.
the dump.
And really, the dump button is just for cursing. I mean, I don't know if they have someone that is monitoring the editorial content of what is being said and deciding, okay, that's okay, or that's not okay to say, and then who gets to decide that? In politics, it kind of opens it up, and because politics really equals celebrity status right now, and celebrities, you have to go a lot further to kind of prove that their reputation was damaged.
Okay, so we can't get him through the
punitively.
FCC.
So I want to move on
nice
to
try.
another political
he's
thing,
cursing.
and this is a free one, particularly since we have two people here of the female persuasion. We decided when we started doing this
persuade me
podcast
that you're female?
that we would not,
You wish.
that we would try and keep this non-time sensitive, but you can guess that we're recording this on a Wednesday night. Oh, that's what it's called, Wednesday night undressed. And this happens to be the Wednesday night after the Tuesday where Hillary Clinton has been given the nomination to stand as president, and that would mean the first female president of the country. Of course, not the first female leader of the country, because of course the Queen has that role. But as the first female president, and we talk a lot about glass ceilings and women not being paid the same as men and so on and so forth. I imagine, for example, if she does become president, that she would be paid the same as. There's no question that she would be paid anything differently, is she?
Yeah, there's a set salary for the job.
Right. So have we actually got past? Are we now post this situation where women are paid less than men? Surely we must have got past this now, and
It's sad,
we
isn't
can
it?
move on.
It's
or is it just
absolutely
women?
sad that he
Are
might
women
think
just
that.
complaining and whinging about, as women always do?
You.
You know what? Racism was over once Obama got elected. So.
Of course it was. Yes. Yeah. No more of that.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Donna, you
I'm
turned
sorry.
pink.
Because it becomes a ridiculous conversation. There's not a woman in this country, probably the world, that doesn't know that they are paid less, and they get to do, even in the big companies. Yeah, they can make their way
I
up to
disagree with
management,
that.
but they can't make their way up to CEO and the
I
board
disagree
of
that
directors.
there aren't any women who don't know that. I think most of the women under about the age of 25 haven't realized that yet.
Oh, I think they're quickly getting there.
They
I think
will
it
get- as
takes
they- as
just
they
a
get
little bit of
older,
experience
they'll
in
get
the
it.
market
But
the
they don't
workplace
believe it
market
now.
to understand.
But do you not think? I mean, I have my Aunt Hermione here with us.
Yeah.
She's from England. And her view was that if women knew what was good for them, they would be at home, cooking and maintaining the staff in the home. There's absolutely no reason whatsoever for them to be going to some office blocky towery thing. I don't
Family
know what you
resemblance
think,
in the voice
dear,
there.
but I think it's terrible, women going out to work and using a typewriter.
Hermione, Aunt Hermione, would you like to
and
step
things
outside so I
like
can
that.
knock your block off?
I don't know. It's that same conversation again. Those slaves don't know how good they had it when they were living on the plantation. Donna,
Did
you're
you
right.
hear? Who was
I
it
know,
today
dear,
who
but
said...
who in fact was in charge of the slaves in the slaves' home? It was mother.
No,
It wasn't father, it
Trump?
was the mother.
Oh, shush.
And
Was it-
that's really not true.
Paul Ryan. No. Who was it who said, well, yes, maybe slaves built the White House, but they were well fed.
Oh, I didn't
Bill
hear that.
O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly. He said they
because-
were well fed and they had government supplied housing. So it's okay if they were slaves.
And that also, I thought you were bringing up the politician whose name I cannot remember.
from Iowa.
Who said that only white men achieve the great
Oh,
things
God,
in
yes.
this world.
So you're not. I mean, you, Kathleen, were saying that you thought this was incredibly important. Not so much that the nominee's name is Clinton, but that the nominee is a female. That
Yeah,
that
it's a historic moment.
Historical
I must
moment.
say that today, and I watch both conventions. Always need to know what the other side is doing and thinking.
I had to keep running to the bathroom and throwing up for the first one.
But today on the
Fine,
radio,
I thought it was diarrhea.
Oh, yeah.
oh please,
Go on.
today on the radio, coming home from work, they played. It makes me tear up now. They played all the women who were talking last night in the DNC, all talking about the fact that it was the first woman in their lifetime, and I cried. I
Yeah,
cried
I
all
cried
the way
too.
home because it was such an emotional moment.
Yeah. It was an incredible emotional moment. Our daughters will see a much more level playing field in certain areas because of this. Eventually, it's not going to happen overnight.
No.
And she'll still attract just as much flack as most women and way more than most men. But it's a start. At least Americans will realize that women can run things. The rest of the world seems to have realized it ages ago.
But why is it that our daughter, my stepdaughter, our daughter, she works for a Swiss bank and earns more money than probably everybody in this room put together? And she has 3 children and a house with a swimming pool.
How does
I'm
that
not
relate
yeah, I
at
was gonna
all
say,
to
well, I
the
mean,
She
what's her
doesn't
point?
see it as a glass ceiling, and anybody
She
who gets in
doesn't
her way,
earn
she'd
as much as the men
she'd
in
hurry
her
carry them.
office.
Sorry?
She doesn't earn as much as the men in her office. Ask her.
Well,
She
I
was
think
hired
she
on the
earns,
cheap.
She earns as much as the people who work with her.
No, she doesn't.
And your
No,
point
I'm
is
not
specious.
going along with you
it's
on this,
absolutely
Taylor.
specious.
That's a very
That's
bad
like
example.
saying, that there was one black man or one Native American or one Chinese American who
Well, you're not
accomplished
surely
something
trying to say that-
once, and therefore they're representative of the entire.
You're surely not trying to say that companies pay people of African American or Native Americans less than women?
Of course not. We're not women.
No. So you guys get paid the same,
Well, we get paid more than women. Come on,
Right.
let's be real.
right? So why should women be paid the same?
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Could you
No,
keep the
it
tomato
is-
sauce away from Kathleen?
I just
Yeah,
busted the
it is.
radio.
It is just as
really-
ludicrous to think that the glass ceiling is gone as it would be to think that
Racism
is
is
gone.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and I agree with you guys. I
mean-
think that it is a wonderful start, but I have no expectation that my daughter can expect to be treated equal to men just because Hillary Clinton got elected. And that is a sticking point for me.
Speaking of sticking points, the glass ceiling may bust, but there's still going to be lots of shards of sharp glass sticking up, ready to tear any woman to shreds who tries to climb through it again.
I really do not see why your daughter is a feisty, probably stunningly good-looking,
Will you stop
young,
gawking at my daughter? Jesus.
young African American girl who gets a decent education, why she could not be president one day. I don't get that. I mean, I think a lot of people have said that there's every chance that Michelle Obama may run one day. She's clever enough, she has the presence and all that sort of thing. Why could an African American girl not be president one day?
The only response that I have to that is, if that was all that it took, if all that it took was the smarts and the poise and the acumen to do the job, then why haven't we had 20 out of the last 40 presidents be African American women?
Well, true. I mean, I haven't got there, but I mean, in England, when I was working in politics, the political party that I worked with, /for, was having active discrimination against men to get women into positions where they could get themselves elected as members of parliament. And that meant, on occasion, that the women who were selected to stand were simply just not up for it. They thought the idea was very cool and everything, but they weren't.
This is every anti-affirmative action.
Yes, I know.
And
I've
it's
ever
generally not true.
Well, some of them,
some, but
completely useless because they've worked jolly hard and everything else. But
some of the men who got selected were totally useless.
Absolutely.
So why are
So
you
I don't
just
think we
saying
should
the
have
women were
affirmative
because of affirmative action?
I don't think we should have such a thing
They
as
selected
affirmative
useless
action.
people of both sexes. Yet you think the women were only selected because of affirmative action. No.
Yeah, this is one of those things where I am always of the opinion that you should try to talk out your disagreements with people and get them to understanding your point of view. But there's a certain baseline that I think everybody has to agree on. And if you cannot understand that the systematic denial of rights and abilities of a group by a different group causes the need for the leveling of the playing field, whether it be called affirmative action or whatever you want to call it, is absolutely necessary to redress some of those rights, then there's really nowhere to go.
It doesn't happen overnight. You don't just say, right, we're all going to be equal now. No, not when you've been brought, the society up to that point has been slanted. It just doesn't happen like that.
I agree. But, of course,
yeah.
the white guy at the table is missing
that's
it.
all right. We can all just throw him on the floor and kick him later. That's
okay.
all right.
Another thing has been put to me. Another thing I think is very interesting. Completely off subject, but good guys doing bad things and vice versa. For example, Fritz Haber, who was the savior of mankind, developed a method to create ammonia at an industrial level. Monster Evil scientist created Zyklon A, ushering in a current state of warfare. It's a very difficult word to say when you've had a couple of beers here on the panel. Wondering about asking the panel to list a good guy who had a horrible deed in the past or a bad guy that did a wonderful thing. My immediate thought comes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to Winston Churchill. Everybody thinks Winston Churchill, good old boy, won the war, little rotund man, British bulldog. This is a man who advocated, when the V-bombs were dropping on London, who advocated chemical bombing of the major German cities. And when the cabinet said, Mr. Prime Minister, that's probably not a very good idea, having reviewed it at the next cabinet meeting, he called them a bunch of psalm-singing defeatists. And fortunately, he didn't get his own way. However, they had not been around at the end of the First War when he decided that he wanted to help the Russians, the White Russians, by actually getting the RAF, the Royal Air Force, to drop chemical bombs on the White Russian military posts, killing somewhere between hundreds and thousands, we don't know. But they had so many chemical bombs left over, they were actually deposited in the White Sea, and where they are to this day. Now, Churchill Churchill's supposed to be this good guy who everybody reveres, but in fact, some of the things that he did beg a belief.
All right.
Well, actually,
Yes.
my example was the one that you used at up front, Franz Haber. He is, like you said in the intro, he developed right now it's currently said that Fritz Haber is responsible for 50% of the nitrogen in our bodies because industrial farming could not be possible without fertilizer. And he's the guy that invented a way to synthesize the ammonia that goes into fertilizer so that we can grow our crops. However, he built the tools that the Nazis used to gas the Jews. So, quite honestly, he was the guy that I thought of when I suggested this topic to Mr. Taylor. What I was thinking about was some of my favorite people in movies that have done some really, really crappy things. Like,
I know.
go ahead.
Dr. Frankenstein.
Which Dr. Frankenstein?
Not Dr. Frankenstein.
You're
I'm
obviously
talking about
referring to
Frankenstein.
the book version as opposed
Gotcha.
to all the movie versions. He's
okay.
asking
He was
you which
actually-
movie version.
He was actually a good guy who was looking into research, and he created a monster.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was bad for the monster and bad for all the poor old villagers who with their pitchforks.
Well, if you are going to do the book, though, he recognized what he did, and he went off and sacrificed his life and the monster's life at the end by stranding them in the Arctic.
Yeah, but he was a good guy who did something that was.
Well, it's
But is he recognized, like, when you talk about Dr. Frankenstein currently, do you have the tendency to think of him as a good guy or a bad guy?
think of him as bad guy because that's
yeah,
what comes across.
too many people haven't read the book and have only seen the movies. So
But what
you're
about
kind
a
of stuck
real
there.
life evil guy who has done good things? I can tell you one right now.
Sure.
Lance.
Why'd you look at Jeremy? Were you thinking of Jeremy?
No, I wasn't thinking of Jeremy. I was thinking of Lance Armstrong.
Huh.
This is not a nice man, okay? But his actions have raised a lot of money for good causes. He's beaten cancer. He's cheated. He's lied about people. He's destroyed people's lives. Yet he has done a lot of good stuff.
I would actually say that goes for a lot of top-tier athletes. I just read an article today that essentially made that point about Michael Jordan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that interpersonal skills are almost non-existent because he is so driven towards success that he doesn't make or keep friends except for Scottie Pippen, or so the consensus was.
And Donna. It's
And
one of his
Donna,
closest
yes.
friends. Yeah. Right?
You know,
We
serial
palled around many times.
Yeah.
serial cheater. I'm guessing that's why he and Donna palled around.
Yes, again.
Just generally speaking, all around unpleasant to be around. And you know, there was a discussion as to whether or not you wanted to have him on your team, even though he was such a great player. The toxic atmosphere that he brought, not only as a teammate but also being viewed as the leader of the team, absolutely toxic. So is he a good guy or bad guy? And a lot of people were making the comment, I don't care about what he did personally, I just care that he was great in basketball.
It's a difficult subject. I mean, I think we can point to two very famous men, Oppenheimer and Nobel, both of whom created one a
point.
terrifically horrible thing and one a semi-horrible, both of whom came to regret mightily their actions. One went on to create the Nobel Peace Prize. He felt so bad, and the other one dedicated the rest of his life to peace. I was actually thinking of things that seem almost a little bit more benign, like Carrier, who you're going to go, who the hell is Carrier? The
No,
man
I know
who
who
invented
Carrier
air
is.
conditioning,
Yeah.
which is now attributed to being one of the probably top 10 causes of the decay of American society. Once you took away that neighborhood feeling of being out on your front porch, everybody walking out at night to escape the heat, and actually knowing what their neighbors, where they lived, what they were doing, who was up to what, and everybody went inside behind closed doors, it was considered the beginning of the decay of our civilization.
I bet he never regretted it and did something good to make up for it.
Well, and see, actually, that
I
comment
don't
that
think
you
he
just made actually was where I was going when I came up with the idea that there are some good people that have some tremendously heinous thoughts and notions, like.
Like me right now.
No, I had just come across the video, and I'll see if I can find the video and post it on the site to go along with this topic, of Eric Clapton in his racist rant about all the Middle Easterners needing to get the hell out of England in the 70s. Like,
I didn't know about that.
yeah, he was like this.
Did you know about that, Jeremy?
This universally revered guy, and then he jumps into this racist tirade in the middle of one of his concerts, and don't know if he's even at this point come to the evolved his understanding to the point that that might not have been the most humanitarian thing to do.
Yeah, he hasn't learned yet, huh?
It's hard to call. And I think there are people every day who are inventing things, saying things, doing things that only time will tell whether or not, they're not going to be able to live necessarily to regret what they did, because only time will tell whether or not what they did was good or bad.
I think that there are a lot of people we could put in this. Henry Ford is a good example. The Samuel Colt. Mm-hmm. There are lots of these names that...
Samuel Colt?
Colt, yes.
Oh,
Who
Colt.
invented Colt? Who invented
I thought you
the-
meant
yeah.
cult, and I wondered if that was the cult leader.
And then, of course, we have Steve Jobs.
Yeah, I like it.
So do I when I can get it, and that's not very often. And what I would like to say is, Kathleen, what have you missed in the media this week?
I missed some...
Excuse me, there was
Let's
a
see.
dirty little laugh from our producer and his team over there. What was that all about?
They were looking at you, Jeremy. I don't know why, but they were.
It's not right, it's
All
not
right.
proper.
There was a report
A
in the
report.
headlines about New Zealand athlete, quote, kidnapped blank at gunpoint in Rio. He was kidnapped. And I'll give you a little hint. It's kidnapped by something. Kidnapped,
Kangaroo.
Kidnapped
I
by...
actually know this one, so I'm not going to say anything.
Okay.
I haven't heard this one.
Okay, tell us.
The police.
Yes. He was kidnapped by the police
Pourquoi?
and taken to his ATM and forced to withdraw money to give to them. And then they let him go.
And
The police
they were
in
caught.
Rio.
They
Not
were
according
in
to the
uniform.
article.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was just the...
Well, you've gone to one of the most corrupt countries in the world to hold your Olympics. Good
Yeah.
grief. What did anyone expect?
How
Yeah,
about this one? How to avoid getting malaria. Okay, it's how to avoid getting malaria, sleep with blank.
Lewis.
Oh, didn't know that.
Well, I don't know what
Sleep
the answer
with.
is, but the Book of Mormon is coming. Not the show. The Book of Mormon is coming to my mind, and when they talk about sleeping with lots of things to get rid of lots of things, and it's all
Okay.
obscene. So my mind is now becoming
Well,
obscene.
this isn't actually terribly obscene. It's actually sleep with a chicken.
Okay, well, in the Book of
Yeah.
Mormon, it was sleep with a baby to get rid of AIDS.
I think they actually mean sleep, though.
No, they didn't mean sleep.
Oh, dear. It's because of smell. Apparently, mosquitoes don't like the smell of chickens. Of course, I'm not sure I would either. So.
I'm thinking the
yeah.
mosquitoes have probably got it right.
Yeah. Oh,
Last
well.
one before we go to the word.
Okay.
With Dr.
Blank
Orlando.
to sue Trump campaign over broken promises.
Dance team.
Yes. He knew that one. The USA Freedom Kids, those 3 cute little kids who performed at his campaign rally and sang all about how wonderful Trump was and practically did Nazi salutes to him. And they were stiffed over their fee and told they had to come and do a second one before they'd pay them, and they were told that instead of payment, they could come and have a table at this next campaign thing where they could sell their videos. And then they were told that no, there wasn't really a contract. It was just an agreement with the staffers, so it didn't really count. And eventually they have to sue the guy.
Guys, he's cheating little kids.
He's cheating little dancy kids.
And America loves him for it.
Oh, God.
That's that hold the line spending that we're looking for in America. That's conservative, yeah.
Kat
Not wasteful with
mentioned
the money.
this particular title or news report to me earlier, and I mentioned that he cheated so many merchants, and I mean the small guy, not the big companies, the small guys, while building the Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. And had you lived in that area in the time, it was all over the papers, and
It's not as if they
does
were
anyone care?
asking for the earth. He cheats little girls out of $1,500 for airfare and staying when they're doing something that he asked them to do.
Now, he's going to say, it wasn't me personally, it was my staff. But we all know, anyone who's been in management knows, as Harry Truman so famously put on his desk, the buck stops here. Your staff follows your example, your rules.
Yeah.
There you are.
Dr. Orlando, after that sanitary experience that the little girls in
that
their
your aunt again?
sparkly dresses,
This sounds more like the
where
uncle.
they enjoyed themselves on the
Or the
On the
transgender
old,
version.
the little girls in their sparkly dresses, thrusting their young limbs
Jeremy,
out
stop
at
it.
the audience.
Oh.
I think it's time for the word. And no
Brothers
thrusting.
and sisters, please excuse Jeremy's lecherous, cantankerous behavior while I
Limbs.
introduce the word for this week. This week's word, mumpish. Mumpish. M-U-M-P-I-S-H.
It's an adjective.
Mums do when they go in the toilet.
Yes.
Oh,
Sorry.
God. we're just.
We're going downhill here.
Yes,
Sailors are not-
We've gone
Is
so
mumpish
downhill.
Well,
an
You're gonna get
adjective
right to hell
meaning
for that,
dull?
you.
Dull. Okay.
An adjective meaning nubby?
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 Nubby.
Or is it an adjective meaning puppet-like?
One, it's dull. I think my vote is dull. We've got a vote from
He thinks it's one, dull.
So producer and engineer go with Jeremy on a 1. It's dull.
It's probably dull, but I'm going to say 3, puppet-like.
I'm going to go with 2, nubby. I think I've heard this word before.
The answer is... Oh, it's dull.
Okay.
Sullen, silent, depressed, or dull got caught.
I was going to say, I thought I'd heard it before, and I thought dull was the... But I just can't bring myself to agree with Jeremy.
Jeremy.
Especially not after those last
I
few
would
comments.
just like to take this moment, if I can, to thank Mr. Conroy, as we now been asked to call him. He's becoming famous. He wants to be called Mr. Conroy.
And you're still hoping to get a free drink out of him at some point.
I am hoping to get a free
Yeah.
drink out of him, but it just doesn't appear. So thanks to Mr. Conroy, thanks to our producer, and editor Eric Holcomb, and engineer Neil Rasmussen, and of course Mr. Conroy. No drink. No, I'm not going to get... No. All right. Okay, well, never mind. Do come
like
and
an
try
idiot, I'm
his
looking
steak
around to
fries.
see where Mr. Conroy is.
And we also want to thank you for running probably the coolest proper pub in the region. From me, your Brexited host, Jeremy Taylor, thanks for joining in. And don't forget to check in on our shows live on KLWN 1320, particularly on Friday and Saturday mornings, where they are more excellent than normal. 9 a.m. Central. Go to the site Wednesday Night Undressed.
Yay.